Okay, we can start working on recording based again. Uh, so we can start, Raj, Shanzi, soluble reactants there, and they were producing soluble salts, right? Any equation, just NaCl. So the acid will be HCl, and you've got NaOH, or sodium oxide, or sodium carbonate, or you can't have sodium metal though. But anyways, in this equation, group 1 compounds are all soluble. Okay? All these group 1 compounds are soluble, the acids are soluble, so everything is soluble. You've got soluble reactants, and they're producing soluble salts. So uske I explained to you what happens is if things are soluble, if you mix HCl and you mix NaOH, okay, HCl और NaOH दोनों को mix करोगे, it's going to produce NaCl plus H2O. But what happens is कि if any of the reactants is in excess, तो वो excess reactant जो है ना, that becomes part of the solution, and it will mix with the salt that is being produced. Okay. So you can't remove the excess. ज़्यादा डाल के ना, if HCl is more, there's going to be some HCl that's going to be left. And your salt will be contaminated by the excess reactant. You can't remove it because it is also soluble. So can you drawing Canada? It looks different. So let's assume that NaOH was in excess. And HCl was, a small amount of HCl was added to it. So the point is that you're going to try, when everything is soluble, you're going to try none of the reactants are in excess. Okay, because if any one of them is in excess, your salt will be contaminated by that excess reactant. So what are you going to do? You're going to do titration. Again, titration, what you have is, you've got a burette. Okay, that's a burette. And you have a conical flask. Okay, you've got a burette, you've got a conical flask. One of the reactant is added to the conical flask. So for example, I've added HCl over here. And I'm going to fill the burette with NaOH. So the particles of NaOH will be part of the burette. So I'm going to put so NaOH particles and its solution are part of the burette. And I'm going to fill it completely. I mean, that's a solution. So I'm going to fill it completely with NaOH. Now, what needs to happen is that if I have 6 particles of HCl over here, I need to add exactly 6 particles of NaOH from the top, and then I'm going to turn off the tap. Okay, that's what my plan is. So nothing goes in excess. What I want to basically do is, one NaOH falls in, reacts with one HCl and forms salt and water. The next NaOH falls in, reacts with the other HCl, forms salt and water, and so on until the last NaOH falls and reacts with HCl and turns it into salt and water. And that's when we turn off the tap. Okay. So again, I'm gonna repeat in titration. अच्छा मैं थोड़ा सा ना बाकियों के लिए I'm just अच्छा so let me just one second, let me open it. So we're going to write the description. Before we write the description, so at the start, the solution is going to be acidic because it obviously has acid in it. So the pH is going to be very low. The pH would be less than 7. I mean, let's say the pH is 1 at the moment. It's acidic. Then slowly what happens is that when NaOH starts falling into the flask, the HCl slowly starts turning into solid water, right? So it turns into solid water. Now salt is neutral, so your solution turns neutral and the pH will be 7. I mean, that's because if there's a colorless solution, we can't really count the particles. There's a colorless solution falling into the flask. So the problem is, how do we know that the exact amount of NaOH has fallen into the flask? You got to look at the pH. If there's acid, it's going to be acidic. If all the acid particles they react and they turn into solid water, it's going to become neutral. And if you don't stop at this point and you still keep adding NaOH, then what happens is that NaOH is in excess. I mean, you've added too much NaOH into the flask. I mean, you had salted water, but now you're still pouring in NaOH from the top, and there's too much NaOH. What that does is that now your pH is going to be basic. NaOH is a base, hydroxides are bases. You can remember there are 4 bases: oxides, hydroxides, carbonates, and ammonia. So the pH will become very high. It's going to become 13. So what you need to do is you need to stop at this point. Okay, this is what needs to happen, that you're going to turn off the tap at this point. So turn off the tap at this precise point. Anyway, should not be in excess. Okay, that should not be in excess. And this is exactly the point where you should turn it off. Now, how do you measure the pH? They're going to be indicators. Okay, we did indicators early on. So you've got mainly you're going to use. We made a list of indicators that would change color. Well, you had methyl orange. Methyl orange, if it's acidic, it's going to be red. And if it turns basic, it's going to turn yellow. So the indicator will immediately change color over here. If there's acid in the flask, it will be red-orange. And if a single drop of NaOH is added, it's going to turn yellow. That will indicate that we should turn off the tap. The other indicator was phenolphthalein. So in acid, it's colorless. And it's pink or purple when it's basic. Okay, so you've got 2 indicators. And there's a third one. And that one we wrote earlier. Okay, let me just find out. Okay, we did indicators early on. Complicated, we did. I do remember doing indicators. One second. We were doing acids and bases. Um, yeah, these were the indicators that we had. So there was this one, thymophthalein, okay, colorless and blue. Okay, so you had colors and you had blue. So all these indicators would change color. Okay, so remember that we're going to stop the titration exactly when the right amount of NaOH has added. Okay, when there's HCl left, HCl in the flask, it's going to be acidic. When all the HCl gets converted into solid water by adding NaOH, it will be pH 7. And if a single drop of NaOH goes in excess, the indicator will immediately tell us. It will change color. and that's the point when we turn off the tap. Okay, is this clear to everyone? ये clear, Nabila, Ghania, Zarar, is this clear? Yeah, is this clear?
यस सर, एक सेकंड जगह लिखो.
ठीक है, Nabila, I'm explaining again कि ठीक है, I'm going to explain this again that see there is मतलब पहला problem तो clear है ना कि you've got HCl in the flask and you're pouring in NaOH from the top, right? So you want to add exactly the right amount of NaOH ताकि जितने भी particles of HCl and they all of them react, right? And that's when you want to turn off the tap. So initially you have acid in the flask, you start pouring in NaOH from the top. The acid, every particle of it will turn into salt and water. That is when you should stop adding NaOH. If you don't stop adding, if there's some extra NaOH that's added, the salt will have extra NaOH in it and it will be contaminated. Okay? So you don't want this to happen. So if there's acid in the flask, the pH will be 1, it will be acidic. If it turns into salt and water, it will become neutral. And if you add too much NaOH to it, there's going to be extra NaOH and the solution will turn basic then. So you don't want to turn it basic, right? You don't want to leave it acidic. You want it to stop somewhere at this point. So your indicators, if you add a few drops of indicators into the solution, just a tiny few drops, the indicators change color. Okay? So it's going to be red orange when it's acidic. And neutral, but you're not really sure what the color is. But if a single drop of NaOH turns it yellow, that would indicate that it's the right time. You should immediately stop adding NaOH because now NaOH is going in excess. You get the indicators will immediately switch color, and that will indicate that that's the right time to turn off the tap. The BS is clear. Or remember the colors, they kind of switch very quickly. Okay. Let's just go. I'll show you titration. ठीक है, एक second. अच्छा, I'm going to show you acid-base titration with indicator. ठीक है, बल्कि let's see. The video directly.
सर ब्यूरेट से हम लोग कैलकुलेट करके डालते हैं ना मॉलिक्यूल, राइट?
हाँ, क्या कह रहा है?
ब्यूरेट से जो है हम लोग मॉलिक्यूल के हिसाब से लाइक सेंड करते हैं, मोल्स कैलकुलेट करके लाइक फोल्ड करते हैं.
नहीं करते ना, क्योंकि ऑब्वियसली काउंट करने का टाइम किसके पास है. You're not going to count. ठीक है. You're going to wait for the indicator to change color.
अच्छा, सही, मतलब इंडिकेटर ऑलरेडी एडेड होता है सर इसके अंदर.
हाँ,
सही.
क्योंकि अगर बीच पे मतलब the point is कि if there is acid at the still in the flask, तो indicator जैसा मिथाइल होना चाहिए, it will remain red. So that will indicate कि भाई there's still acid left.
तो बेसिकली हम लोगों ने तब तक ब्यूरेट से पोर करना है जब तक वो एसिडिक स्टेट से लाइक एसिडिक स्टेट से निकले और बेसिक स्टेट से पहले, राइट?
हाँ, मतलब बेसिकली वो ना एक सिंगल ड्रॉप से ना इट टर्न्स बेसिक एंड वो इंडिकेट करता है कि all the acid has been used up, all of it has reacted, and now you should turn the tap off. ठीक है. तो
यस.
ये मैं अच्छा ये मैं शो करता हूँ एक सेकेंड. हाँ, ये क्यों ऐड आई जा रहा है? 1 second. ऐसे स्क्रीन नजर आ रही है ना? अच्छा, this is what your burette looks like. ठीक है, तो स्क्रीन शेयरिंग में इसको, अच्छा this is what your burette looks like, और नीचे फ्लास्क है. अभी ये ना ऐड एक सेकेंड, जैसे मैंने फ्लास्क दिखाना है कि लेट मी शो यू द फ्लास्क. अच्छा, ये few drops of indicator are added. ठीक है, ये से he's added indicator and he's probably adding methyl orange to it. सही है. Not methyl orange. Methyl orange जो था तो it would have been red. It's probably phenolphthalein. Phenolphthalein जो होता है ना वो acid में colorless है. So at the moment your flask over here is colorless, he's going to start adding NOH from the top. So as long as there's acid in the flask, it will remain colorless. ठीक है, so slowly he starts adding. और एक ड्रॉप से ना मैं वो दिखाता हूँ, अब नजर आएगा. अच्छा, by adding a single drop over here, ये देखो, it's turning pink. ठीक है, pink indicates that all the acid has been used up. Now you're adding extra NOH. ठीक है, तो वो ये permanent pink हो गया. ठीक है, all of a sudden it switches pink. That means that you've added too much NOH to it, and that is exactly the point where you should stop. But you should try and stop before this point, actually, technically. But a single drop, if it turns it pink, that would mean that you've added enough NOH to it. Okay? Is this clear?
So ये तो बेसिकली कलर चेंज पे डिपेंड कर रहा है रोटेशन.
हाँ, मतलब
सही.
वरना वो दूसरा काम जो है मोल्स वाला वो काउंट करना, दैट्स काइंड ऑफ इम्पॉसिबल. ठीक है.
ओके.
अच्छा चलिए ये करते हैं. मैं एक सेकंड, मैं खुद एक सेकंड मीटिंग से चलिए वो दिखाना था. अच्छा, so let's start writing how you're going to do that. ठीक है, उसकी the description again, it's going to be, so this is how your description would go. This description is slightly longer. So description है कि add fill the burette with NaOH. Actually, it depends. It could be the other way around. The color change would be different. Fill the burette with NaOH and HCl will reacting, right? Now add a pipette. Use a pipette. Pipette is a device. Oh, it's like a dropper. It's like a dropper that is kind of like a measuring device. So pipette 25 cm cube of HCl into conical flask.
ये सेकंड स्टेप है पेपर के थ्रू.
हाँ, मतलब वो है ना कि दो steps. The first two steps. कि add NaOH to the burette, right? So fill it up, and second step is you add 25 cm cube of HCl into the conical flask using a pipette. Pipette is like a dropper. It's like a dropper that has उसके पीछे ना there's a suction device. So it has just, well, I'm going to show you what a pipette looks like. As a second, in the conical flask, you will add a few drops. So add, and it's your choice whatever indicator you're going to add. So add add a few drops of, let's say, methyl orange indicator. So the actual answer में ना, it is sufficient that if you only write indicator, that's it. Like if there, because there's so many points that it's hard to fit the answer. So यहाँ पे ना you can just write बल्कि इसको ना I'm going to put this in brackets. Add a few drops of indicator. That's it. They can be specific, but normally in the answer you're just writing 4 points, maybe 4 to 5 points. Add a few drops of indicator. Then you start titration. Start adding NaOH from the top. Okay, that's known as titration. So add NaOH from burette dropwise. You have to do this very slowly. And what you're going to do is you're going to wait for the color to change. So you're going to stop immediately. When color changes. In our case, since we were using methyl orange, the color would be acid था शुरू में, so it was red orange. And it will change to yellow. Okay, if you're using methyl orange. If you're using phenolphthalein, so because the flask had acid in it, it would be colorless initially, and one extra drop of NaOH will turn it pink. Okay, so if you use phenolphthalein, it will go from colorless to pink. That's when you stop. As a stop titration when color changes. Next step. There's one problem now. Okay, you've stopped at the right point, okay, which is you have tried not to add excess NaOH. You have stopped at let's close to this exact point, right? You've made your NaCl and H2O. Now there's one problem, which is that your
It's to
solution,
remove करना है.
नहीं H2O तो remove करना है, लेकिन उससे पहले ना the salt that you have produced is contaminated by the indicator itself. मतलब methyl orange add किया था ना इसमें. So the problem is that the salt is contaminated by the indicator itself. So अब करना ये है कि how do you get rid of the indicator? So what you're going to do is you add charcoal. Charcoal is an absorbent material to remove indicator. दो काम कर सकते हैं. You can either add charcoal. Charcoal it's like burnt wood, and that will remove indicator. Or the second point is you note down the volumes used. So I'm writing that in brackets. Note down the volumes used. Once you know what amount reacts with what amount, right? So note down the volumes used and simply repeat without indicator. Okay, once you know what volume reacts with what volume, right? Simply repeat without the indicator. Okay, if you know, okay, 20 cm3 of HCl and 30 cm3 of NaOH, they are reacting together. So just measure them and do the whole process again, but this time don't add an indicator. So the indicator is now gone. Now only thing is you have to get rid of the water, right? You have to form pure dry crystals. So how do you form pure dry crystals? You evaporate or heat the solution till saturation point. Then what? Cool gradually. So when you cool gradually, crystals are going to be formed. Filter out crystals that are formed. And dry crystals in sunlight. Yeah, that's it. So it's lengthier to write, but it's not that difficult. Every time you're going to write exactly the same answer. You fill the burette with NaOH. I mean, you've got two reactants. So one of them goes into the burette and the other one goes into the flask. It's your choice. It could be the other way around as well. So fill the burette with NaOH, put conical flask, put the HCl into the conical flask by using a pipette. You add a few drops of indicator, your choice. You've got three indicators, it's your choice, whatever you're going to add. You start the titration, add NaOH from the burette drop by drop. Stop titration when the color changes, when the indicator changes color. You add charcoal to remove indicator. Or the other option is you note down the volumes that have been used and repeat the experiment, but this time don't add an indicator.
So should we
Evaporate.
draw the diagrams every time we answer?
They need diagram to draw करनी जरूरत नहीं है, unless they ask you to, ठीक है? ये clear है?
Yes, sir.
So that's the whole entire titration process. ठीक है? I mean, they can be very, they can ask you very detailed questions on this as well. For example, they might ask you why is this evaporate heat the solution to its saturation point cool gradually. So why is the solution cooled? Let's say. So the answer to that is that solubility decreases. That's why crystals are formed. वो जब उसको करते हैं ना saturation point तक, and when you start cooling the solution, the solubility decreases and crystals start forming. So solubility at high temperatures, salts are more soluble. बाकी मतलब it's good. I mean, you can get MCUs. Why is activated charcoal added? That's to remove the indicator, right? Uh, why is the solution added drop by drop so that you don't add too much of NaOH in excess? मतलब गलती से tap you don't add too much to of NaOH that's falling from the flask from the burette. So any reaction which has soluble reactants and soluble salts being produced, that will be titration. So we can do another question. The only thing is you have to write the whole thing again, exactly the same thing. For example, if I want to make क्या चीज soluble होगी? If I want to make let's say I want to make potassium nitrate. K is +1, NO3 is -1. Now, what acid would I use?
Nitric acid.
Okay, NO3, so that's going to be HNO3. And I've got four options. I'll have potassium oxide, potassium hydroxide, or potassium carbonate. Potassium metal can't be used क्योंकि वो bazet metal नहीं है.
It's very
Potassium is
reactive.
it's very reactive. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use let's say I use potassium hydroxide. K +1 or OH -1. Hydroxide will produce water, right? So now this one is that potassium is group 1, so everything is soluble. Group 1 is soluble, acids are soluble. This is soluble, and water is a liquid. So that's this. So what you're going to do, you're going to do the whole step. Okay, so describe the process, how the salt is going to be produced. That's titration. What are the steps? The steps are fill the burette with, I mean, it's your choice. You've got two reactants, right? So I'm going to go with QH, fill the burette with, बल्कि acid डाल देते हैं, fill the burette with.
So वैसे it does not matter ना.
हाँ बस वो कलर चेंज उल्टा होगा. मैं तो बता देता हूँ कि fill the burette with nitric acid, pipette. ठीक है, pipette 25 cm cube, KOH, कुछ भी लिख लो। अच्छा, into Golgo flask, or after that, add a few drops of indicator. Now your choice, add a few drops of, add phenolphthalein this time. अच्छा, इसका एक रफ डायग्राम बना लेता हूँ कि what I'm doing is from the top I'm adding I think I've added nitric acid to the top, and at the bottom I've got यहाँ पे क्या I've got KOH. ठीक है, bottom I've got KOH. So I've got a base at the bottom. So initially the color of the flask will be phenolphthalein is basic, it's pink. So initially it's going to be pink. I'm going to start adding nitric acid from the top, and the KOH is going to get used up eventually, right? It's going to form salt and water. So start titration. And you're going to add nitric acid drop by drop. From burette. अच्छा, फिर क्या? You're going to add nitric acid drop by drop from the burette. Stop titration when color changes. In our case, it's going to be pink to colorless. I mean, initially it was pink, okay, because you had QH. But once all the QH has reacted and nitric acid is being added, so it's no longer going to remain pink. It's going to turn eventually colorless. So that's when you're going to exactly stop. So then you're going to remove the indicator. So how do you do that? Add charcoal. Remove indicator. Or finally, the last thing is you've got salt and water. The QH has turned into KNO3 plus H2O. So all you need to do is you need to crystallize. So evaporate the solution till saturation point. So cool gradually. To obtain crystals. And filter out crystals form and dry them between. In sunlight. Okay. The exact, I mean, it's ditto copy. It's exactly the same process. Repeated once more. So just remember, it's just a longer description, and you have to write this description when they talk about hydration. So if all of them are soluble, you're going to use titration. If the reactant is insoluble, then it's going to be excess method. Okay? There's a third one, which is ionic precipitation, but we'll talk about that later on. Pehle we'll practice these two. अच्छा, but is this clear? ये clear है सारा? Nabila, Ghania, is this clear? Yeah, is this clear?
जी सर 9th में जब पढ़ा था तो हर चीज का मैम ने अलग अलग वॉल्यूम लिखवाया था, लाइक ब्यूरेट भी इतना होगा, इतने ड्रॉप जाएंगे।
नहीं नहीं, खाली ये मैंने जो मैंने लिखा ना, दैट्स इट, दैट्स व्हाट इज नीडेड।
ठीक है।
ठीक है। वो एक्स्ट्रा मतलब मतलब जो उन्होंने पूछना है ना, वो जस्ट गोइंग टू आस्क दिस। ठीक है। वो हमने कोई एक्स्ट्रा नहीं पढ़ना, उसका
यस।
कोई फायदा नहीं है। ठीक है। तो सिर्फ जो लिखा है ना वही बस बताना है। ठीक है।
ओके।
तो चलें, ठीक है, लेट्स कंटिन्यू टुमारो देन। ठीक है, सेम टाइम।
अल्लाह हाफिज़।
ठीक है।